Welcome once again to Xtreme Memories. Of course, Xtreme Memories right here on the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel on the 15th and the 30th of every single month. If you haven't done so already, like, comment, share, and subscribe to those guys right there. Yeah, the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. Now, on this episode of Xtreme Memories, we are marching into 2022 with King Faviano. Now, King Faviano, a legend in Southern California before XPW and after XPW. But he had an interesting time while in the company. This was an invasion angle of sorts. Kind of like what we did to ECW. He was part of a faction called the SoCal Jobbers Union that invaded XPW. In the ring with guys like Pogo the Clown, of course, who we now know as R-Truth. Ron Killings talks all about that in the ins and outs of Extreme Pro Wrestling and where he is right now. Once again, we invite you to enjoy this episode. Every single month, new episodes on the 15th and 30th of Xtreme Memories on the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. Fans, enjoy this one. King Faviano, one of the legends. Welcome to Xtreme Memories, my friend.
Hey, man, I'm glad to be here. Took a minute to get going, but at least we finally got everything going. First of all, I'm 56 years old, man. I have no idea how to work stuff. That's what you have kids for. So I had to have my daughter help me, but I'm glad we finally got back on.
Thank you, Princess Faviano. Then.
Yes, for sure.
All right, King Faviano, welcome to Xtreme Memories. And for those of you Southern Californians in the wrestling scene, my guess, you know King Faviano. Of course, XPW was a big thing, but King Favi was and is a big name, regardless, I believe, of his involvement, whether a part of XPW or not. Because people already knew you before, and then you were kind of synonymous on your own, where some guys, not to take anything away from them, but some guys relied on the fact that they were in XPW to kind of garnish their status and their name. You, on the other hand, were in XPW, but you were already established before and after, I believe. So,
right.
But it was an interesting time in wrestling and in your career. So we'll talk all about that right now. But first off, just to recap, you were at New Year's Revolution, January 11, 2002, at the famed Grand Olympic Auditorium.
Do you actually know the backstory on that and what happened to me that night?
We at the Wrestling Chatter, we're going to make all our subscribers
laugh. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. This is I've told this story one time, and it was on one of my other podcasts that hardly anybody listened to, so I'm pretty sure it didn't get out. But whenever you're ready, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I've only worked for XPW 2 shows, but both those shows had huge backstories and a lot going on.
Please, we're going to get into that. But I want to start, before we get into those two, that was in January 2002 and July 29th. Almost 3 years to the day of the third anniversary. It would have been June 29th. Scratch that. Yeah. Okay, first question. Where'd you grow up, Favi? Are you California native, Angelino?
Absolutely. Grew up in East LA, and then we moved to Long Beach when I was like 13 years old. And I'm 56 now, so been living in Long Beach ever since.
Okay, cool. And then getting into pro wrestling, not getting into the business, but how old were you? Where were you when you knew, like, oh my gosh, well, this is my thing?
I started. It's funny because the guy, it kind of came full circle, because the guy that I'm working for now, Manny Pinson, who's running UWC, United Wrestling Council, I was working for a security company. I worked at the Forum from 1990 to 1995, and that's where I met Manny, and Manny introduced me to Pistol Pete Marquez in 1994, and that's how I started training with him.
Wow, so you were working at the Forum back when WCW was going there, back when it was Showtime Lakers still, Magic was still playing and all that. Wow.
That's a whole separate show. Anytime you want to talk, I got stories that I can tell, and I have stories that I can't tell
Well, then
because
you
I
know what?
value my life.
Then Favi, that sounds good because, of course, as a lot of the fans know here on the Wrestling Chatter, we have a new series called Cali's Finest that appears on the 10th of every month, and we interview California legends. This is going to be Xtreme Memories, but that's I'm glad you said that because again, you're one of those guys that can be interviewed for Xtreme Memories and Cali's Finest. You know, so
Yeah.
that's very cool.
Well,
Okay, so
when I first started working there, you had to pay your dues, just like in wrestling. So the first time WCW and WWF came to the forum, I was working in the parking lot. But the
oh,
second time they both came around, I had already made supervisor. So I was downstairs at the curtain. So man, I saw Dustin Rhodes and Steve Austin get into a real fight because he potatoed him. And to be honest, I was scared to death. I couldn't break him up or whatever. So that's just one of the stories. I mean, it was amazing back then to be backstage and see all those guys in person. But I have a ton of stories of a lot of stuff I did for them, backstories and all that from those days. It was only 2 times, one each with WWE or WWF and one with WCW.
okay, man, I'm looking forward to that down
Yeah.
the road for sure, man. So okay, so you got into it. How old would you say where you were when you knew you loved wrestling?
I was about 26 when I first
Oh,
started.
no, I mean, like, what age were you? Not breaking into the business, but what age were
Oh,
you watching on TV? Like, I want to be a part of this. I get this. I love this.
I was a kid. I was 11 years old, and my dad used to take me to the Olympic. You know, Patrick Howitt's always talking about the Olympic Auditorium. He took me there,
Yeah,
and I saw like Roddy Piper and all those guys. And that day, just to see how much, and Freddie Blassie, people like that, how much havoc they can cause. That's what got me hooked.
wow. So you date back then. We're talking the days like Larry Rivera. I'm from the school just a little bit younger than you, to where when I started going, just moved to the sports arena, LA
Right.
sports arena. Yeah. So were you there? Were you there back when Piper and the Guerreros were feuding and the La Cucaracha?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah. Piper, the Guerreros, Black Gorman, and Goliath. It was huge back then.
different kind of huge. It was a territory was huge.
Right, right, and people, us way before kayfabe,
Oh, yeah.
everything and all that. So people, would wait, and I just all remember Roddy Piper. People wanted to actually kill that dude. I mean, that guy had more heat than back then, and as much as he did back then as he did when he, started working Madison Square Garden. It was amazing.
That's awesome, man. We're gonna be doing some features on the Grand Olympic Auditorium, uh, the former location of the LA Sports Arena, the Forum, and all that. You'd be
Yeah.
great to reference. So you were how old now, and how did you break into the business?
So I was about 26, if I can remember correctly. And that's what happened. Manny said, "Hey, I know Pistol Pete. I've been training with him. I'll bring you over there." And it was a lot different back then. I told him I wanted to be a wrestler. He said, "Okay, dude, no problem." Took me to Gil's garage and literally, not beat me up like punch, bloody, whatever. But I mean, like maybe 10 hip tosses in a row. And for the people who know Gil's garage, that ring is harder than probably a regular floor. And I mean, I was dying. I was so sore and hurt the next day that in my mind I was like, yeah, I don't want to go back. But like, this is what I want. So I went back. I think it was about 3 days later, and then Pete said, "Okay, now you're ready." He goes, "That's Manny told me that's how he sees if you want to be a wrestler. If you come back, then he's going to train you. But if you leave, then he knows you don't really want it."
Yeah, that's it's so similar. Favi, did you ever venture into Slammer's wrestling gym at all back in the day?
I went 2 times just
Okay.
to go check it out or whatever. But I didn't actually work out. I just went to go check it out or whatever. And I also went to EWF, Jesse Hernandez, and it was right when what's his name just got the gig for Papa Shango. I think
Oh,
his name was,
Charles
yeah.
Rowe. Yeah.
Well, that was my first day over there, and they were getting him ready because he had just signed the contract. So when I started doing roles, and I see this big old dude, I thought, man, this isn't for me or whatever. But then once Jesse told me, no, he just got the contract. We're working with him, and then it was too far, out there in Riverside or whatever. So luckily, when I came back, man, he said, "Hey, let's go to Pete." And, it went from there.
The only reason I brought up Slammer is because you you reminded me just when you said back then when you started, the ring was hard like asphalt or concrete. Same thing at Slammers.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I never rolled on it, but that's what I heard.
I mean, it was just a different animal, the wrestling business as a whole back then. Like you said, the kayfabe too.
Yeah, big
I
time.
mean, when we started, and even when you were there in 2002, but when we started in '99 in XPW, and then I was, SCCW prior to that, like even up until 2002, I would say 2003, 4 was when you really started to feel the change when the interviews started coming out.
Right.
Like this, but okay, I digress. But
Yeah.
It was still very much alive, kayfabe, and that old way of treating the business back then and operating. It was still there. It wasn't like it was in the 80s, but compared to now, it was still alive. You did not talk the same way on the opposite side of the curtain as you did back in this side of the curtain.
Well, I didn't get smartened up till I would say it was close to a year, at least 8 months that I can remember the training until, and I remember the day because that day Manny and I were getting ready to go train at Gills, and Pete was getting ready to come with us or whatever. And I remember him telling, you haven't smartened him up yet, have you? Or whatever. And he said, no. He said, okay, well, today's the day we smarten him up.
Oh, wow.
So it took a long time till I even knew, and then when he smartened me up, then he felt I was ready and I could start working some shows.
Yeah. And then that's like the nature of the business. Like, why is it taking so long? But they're telling you that whole time.
Yeah, and it's a test. If you say, well, forget it, I had enough, you leave. But if you stick it out, bam, then you keep going.
Yeah, you're not that, oh, hey, December's here, guys.
It's time.
On the 25th is Christmas. Not that kid that's totally patient, or you got little brats that want everything now, but they're weeding out, man.
Yeah, big time.
So going back then, speaking of SCCW, you were working for like the unofficial brother sister company, the UIWA, for a while.
Yes.
Right. Could you talk a little bit about that?
My memories on that are because it was such a long time ago. I just remember working a few shows for them, which was kind of like more getting my feet wet, working with them. But that UIWA, we talk a lot about even though there's maybe 10 people, you always give it 100%. But from that UIWA show, I can't remember exactly which one it was. Kiss from Kiss and Charisma just happened to be there, and he saw me work that night, and he said, "Hey man, do you train lucha?" And I said, "No man, I've been training mostly pro wrestling. You need to start training, and you need to come with me." Right. And that's how I got involved with him and started training luchas, because back then there wasn't that many pro wrestling. It was mostly lucha libre or whatever. Yeah, so you had to train if you wanted to get work.
Right. I mean, yeah, that was the thing. Like when you were saying, were you trained? Say again, were you trained when we brought up Slammers and you were referenced?
I was training with Pistol Pete back then at Gil's Garage.
At Gil's Garage, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And so you had Gil's Garage, you had Slammers, you had Jesse Hernandez.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't much in between that triangle right there.
Right.
No, there was nothing.
It's funny because what happened was, and I was still working. I worked 1 or 2 shows for UIWA, and then Kiss said, "Hey, you need to start training lucha if you want to get work." And then there was a guy named Night Shadow who was running these little shows over in Obregon Park in East LA, and he had like a little show called Horror Kung Fu Theater, and Pete was involved with him. So that guy saw me and he said, "Hey, I think you got something here." So there was a guy named James Macias who used to he had a big house. So a guy named Antonio who used to run All Nations, he's the one who, instead of getting them a hotel, he would put them up at James' house. And everybody was there. Mean Máscaras, Dos Caras, Fuerza Guerrera, they would all stay over there when he would bring them in. So he said, David told James, "This guy's got something," talking about me, which I had been in the business for probably, I'm going to say 2 years, maybe close to 3 years.
Right.
And he said he's different. He puts on a show. He doesn't just do moves or whatever. So James actually paid my booking fee for the first time I worked at All Nations for Antonio, and
Okay.
it snowballed from there. And that place, East LA, for back, God, we're talking late 90s, early 2000s, like 98, 99.
Okay.
Man, I saw Christopher Daniels work there, and that guy, same guy, James Macias, he told Antonio, no, Chris Daniels, no Spanish at all. I remember him telling Antonio, "Hey, book this kid, Chris Daniels. He can go." And Antonio's like, he's a pro wrestler, but not book him.
Oh yeah.
But what happened was Superboy was working there, and he said, "Yeah, bring him." And when I saw him, I'm like, "Man, this guy's amazing." And then even Chris Jericho was over there and worked a couple of shows. So it just shows the guys like we're talking about who really want it. I mean, when I saw those guys, they really wanted it and working shows like that to progress. You know what I mean?
Right. And they
Yeah.
looked at it like you got so many guys, young kids, hopefully hearing this too now in the business that are like, they're watching Raw, they're watching WWE, and then they look at themselves wrestling in front of 10 people, and they think that this is a bad, negative thing.
Yeah.
But don't see, like you said, Daniels, Jericho, yourself. They see as like, oh man, this is a gift because they're allowing me to practice for when I get there.
Yeah. Exactly.
In general.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're so like the diversity. That's why
Right.
they got so much work, because he had been working with them. He could work with Chris or Chris Jericho, or Chris Daniels could work with anybody, and plus Superboy was there, and Superboy had just happened to start going to Michinoku Pro. And that's where I wanted to go. I mean, I wanted to go there, but he was like, "You know what? You have to send a videotape and blah, blah, blah." So they sent, Chris, it was both Christopher Daniels and I talking to him. Chris sent his in, and that's when they picked him up for Curry Man.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So what? So okay. So now we're talking, like you said, circa 98, 99, which
yeah.
Incidentally is when XPW was founded in 99, and then it launched or 98. It was founded and then launched in 99. What year were you talking at Gills? Just to go back, what year did you start at Gills when you first started in wrestling?
94 and 95.
Okay, so 94, and this is as you were working at the forum, the fabulous forum,
Right.
man.
Right.
So, did you go in the 80s? Did you go to WWF when they were at the arch rival of the forum, the LA Sports Arena?
I did. I did.
Okay.
And it's funny because the first time I went, I took my stepdad and my mom went because my stepdad wanted to see the Samoans. Remember when Roddy Piper and Tonga Kid were wrestling Cowboy Bob Orton and Roddy Piper? And that was the big rivalry. And where we were sitting, there was probably about 6 big Samoan dudes right in front of us. And when Cowboy Bob Orton started hitting Tonga Kid with that cast, they started going off, and we got scared. We got up and left because they were about to get up and start some trouble. So we ended up getting up and leaving. And again, there was no, the curtain wasn't pulled back then, so you had to be careful.
Right. Did you get like working at the forum, going to the LA Sports Arena? Did you get any hookups like that, or were they just two separate entities?
No, two separate companies worked at the different ones. So no, I just had to pay my money and go. And I had been working at a retail store since I was 16. So we all had money. So then we started going to like the Anaheim Convention Center. We went to go see Terry Funk, and people were legitimately scared of him too, because he'd come out with his branding iron, and we would go there and the sports arena when Andre the Giant and them wrestled Orndorff, and we were down on the floor, and we ended up getting lost through the whole smudge and had to find each other at the snack bar.
Dude, I know you weren't there, but in 2000, go funk yourself at the LA Sports Arena. Sabu Funk. I'm telling you, bro, when Funk came back, we all like, I'll say it, man. We all marked out.
Yeah.
We didn't know, dude. We're like, I think he's really pissed. Because, what's funny is they were pissed because Supreme and Messiah wrestled before them. And that was a big mistake because the ring was just, they couldn't get all the tacks and the glass out in the event. So they were, Sabu was a little bit more legitimately pissed, but they were both pissed. And then that's when they came out and they said, screw it. We're not going to fight in the ring. We're going to go out. And that's when they knocked the big X's down.
Yeah.
That was not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And that was basically them saying, well, F you guys, if you're not going to clean the ring, we're going to dock your entrance. And all right. But when Funk was back, dude, like you said, I can validate what you just said to the fans. That guy, you did not know. Even when you were in the business, you did not know if he was legit.
Crazy. Yeah.
And
crazy.
He came up to Rivera and Rivera ran for his life, dude. And I kind of didn't know. And I think it's one of my favorite moments in my career is Terry Funk grabbed me, clobbered me, and he was light as a feather. And I remember like the realization, like, wow, he's working right now.
Yeah, and when you say mark out, the first time I saw him in person, I believe it was at one of the XPW shows. I wasn't working, but I went with Ron Rivera. You know, you can't help it. Oh, dude, there's Terry Funk. That dude's a legend. You know, and then you don't know whether to go say hi to him or, you know, it's just the way he is, the way he carries himself. You know, you kind of keep your distance until, hey, what's up, guys? And then okay, he's cool.
You just nailed it.
Yeah.
All that psychology you just talked about is exactly what I thought when I was with him. Like, I'm gonna say hi to him when he wants.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. And respect for the elders in general too. And if there's anybody you want to show that's how you operate, what better person to show that to than a guy like Terry Funk? You know,
absolutely. I agree 100%.
Right. And he always was one of those legends that you could tell enjoyed helping a league grow than to, let's say, all right, I'm going to use my status and stay in the WWE for the rest of my life. He was one of those guys you could tell wanted to go down to the indies and help guys come up.
Yeah. And Joseph from PCW, I talked to him a lot. I want to say like minds think alike or whatever. And that's all he talks about. That's all he talks about is Terry Funk. You know, for somebody like that to talk about him like that, it's just amazing that the kind of image that he presents that people, you know, that's who they talk about when you talk about pro wrestling. Somebody like Terry Funk who was just legit, you know.
We're so blessed, Bobby, to have been a part of wrestling in that era. No.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to sound like that grizzled old man, but it's kind of like a lost art kind of now. You know what I mean?
There's a fine line between that. I know what you mean when every generation, older, middle-aged or older people, it was better when we were kids.
Yeah.
Now, that is true. But however, there are aspects of life that you can process and dissect and kind of prove that things were better. But there are some older people that will just say that about anything. I believe you and I and people like us can really process this, dissect it to kind of give that a little validation again and credit that things were different. The fans, as a kid, you are kayfabed, so you are put into this fantasy world a little bit more easier than today. That's true,
right?
You know? Okay, man. So, can you kind of, speaking of that, back in the day, like our generation, we're not that far apart in age, but we got into this business when this new era was coming in, but a lot of the old ways and wrestlers were still involved in the business. Can you, the SoCal scene in the mid to late 90s in a nutshell, can you kind of describe it to the fans out there, the younger fans and guys coming up in the business?
Well, see, but the SoCal scene, the era that you're talking about right now, I after I trained with Pete, he kind of slowed down and didn't do that much anymore. So when I got picked up by Kiss and Charisma and started working for Antonio at All Nations, I was mostly lucha. I hardly worked any, American shows back then because there was so much work, in the luchas. And once I got established at All Nations with Antonio and started working with guys like Superboy, Capitan Oro, his brother and stuff like that. Not that I didn't want to expand, but I was very content there because I was learning Patrick Howitt calls Superboy the miracle of modern science. And when I saw that guy work, I'm like, man, it was amazing. The guy that size, that can move like that. So I was mostly during that whole time luchas. I worked for All Nations for Antonio, and then I worked a lot for Kiss and Carisma, mostly luchas for quite a while. And then I started working for Martin at the Anaheim Marketplace. So it was mostly lucha until, and then of course, when I started working for Ron Rivera and Revolution Pro, he was, I would say, maybe one of the first hybrid type of, that would mix the luchas with the American style.
Good point. And maybe a little bit of strong Japanese style.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to XPW, through Ron.
Okay, we'll get into that. Right.
Go for it.
So, and just to recap, I'm sure all you XPW fans know when you reference Pat Howitt, that is Larry Rivera.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
What was it said about modern science? What he called?
He called Superboy. It's funny because, a long story short, we used to have a radio station, and his brother Frankie Howitt used to work there. So when we had Patrick come in, that we were talking about Superboy, and that's what he called him, the miracle of modern science.
I can hear it right now. Chico the modern science.
You know what? That dude is I tell him all the time. I know he's got his band and all, but I said, man, that guy is a genius. And I would, anytime he wants to do a podcast, a commentary, or whatever with them, just for that personality right there, I think it's awesome.
You're preaching to the choir here. But yeah, dude, he's one of the best, man. And we both luckily just understood the business, and then understood how to basically guerrilla and Bobby with each other, eventually. But anyway, working for talk a little bit about, because I'm going to go down the list here of companies, and man, you if there's anybody that's boots and jersey, whatever, to be retired, like they had up in the forum where you used to work, someone like you that's been to, let's say, also MPW, Revolution Pro, working for MPW and Rev Pro at the time. What was your opinion on XPW? Was it a place that you wanted to work at while you were in those companies?
It's a place that they talked about a lot. When it first started to come to the forefront, that's all they were talking about. Hey, we get to XPW, that's where you're going to get some shine. They're starting to build up steam or whatever. But to be honest with you, I never thought I would work for. I thought, well, I'll never get there. I don't know how to work death matches. I mean, I know how to do luchas and I know how to entertain, but I'm not death matches or anything like that. But a lot that was the big hype, the big talk about that or whatever. I remember. It might have been Ron Rivera that I was at an MPW show that he just happened to be at, and he was talking about that. He was saying, "Hey, man, if I can get my stuff in there, it'll take it to another level or whatever, because it's not just death matches. They do wrestle and all that." And I didn't know, and I was like, "Yeah, well, sounds good," but I didn't think anything of it. I never thought it would come to anything, but he actually did make a lot of it. And Ron too, he doesn't get that much credit, but he was very smart because he put me with Buddy George and made the Tex-Mex connection. So it was talked about and people wanted to go there, but either they were scared or just didn't know, like me, just didn't know what it was about.
And that was at a time when, the reason I asked that, because XPW in a weird way back then was an interesting animal of its own, and interesting and convoluted to unpack, because you had controversy, but you also had the league. For back then, it was a big deal for the coverage they got on television,
right?
Which was a different time in wrestling. It's hard to explain this to, it's sometimes hard to explain to younger people how important television was. It is important now, but how much more important it was back then, before social media existed.
Exactly, because that's all you had. There was no internet, so that's all you had. And that's what happened with Ron with Revolution Pro. He kept telling us that they're not just death matches or whatever. There's legitimate workers bringing in Juventud and people like that. And they had a weekly show that I can't remember, it was on channel like 56 KDOC or something like that. And they actually brought Buddy George and I to do a little vignette or whatever over there. Is when Ron was doing the thing with the hot apple pie and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So see, we didn't even know. We just thought it was Deathmatch Central, and
Ah.
people wanted to get there, but we didn't think we would ever get there because we thought this is what the thought process, especially when you see somebody like Pogo the Clown, who I have a big time story about that. I'm like, these dudes are huge and they're going through these tables. They'll never want to use anybody like us. But Ron's the one who's smartened us up to that and said, yeah, man, they're gonna, really start making waves because they're the talent that they're bringing mixed with what we got here is gonna really bring it bigger than what what they strive to be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and you're right. By the way, Ron Rivera, American Wild Child, does not get mentioned enough. A very, very smart worker, a smart
Yeah.
guy for business. And so, okay, yeah, like you said, television. People know it's a big deal today, but it was just. And look, you were on TV. I was on TV before the internet. I can tell you, man, from direct experience, it was different being on television back then before the internet was the way it is
Yeah.
now. Really was. It was a bigger deal. So like you said, like KGLA, KDOC,
Yeah.
you think those channels are big, but boy, compare being on those channels without the internet versus now or being on a regular channel, night and day, dude.
Well, that was huge because
Yeah.
when we went to film that, I didn't even know. Ron had one of those little small cameras or whatever. He said, "Hey, look, this is what I want you guys to do. We're going to make you the Tex-Mex connection and all that." I'm like, "Cool." I thought we were just videotaping it, to cut promos or whatever. And when it came out on the TV, you start calling your mom. Hey, I'm on TV, and you want to talk about marking out? That's when we started marking out when we saw it on TV, and then that's when something clicked off. Well, man, maybe this is, maybe we do have a chance, and it is pretty big. You know what I mean? It totally made a big difference.
Did you, speaking of that, I want to get into the Grand Olympic and all that, but before I do that, speaking of that right there, like a lot of guys, they would that going to the Grand Olympic. I know you worked the Forum, the sports arena, but when you saw yourself on television, did that kind of, and now this is making me step my game up even more?
Exactly.
Okay.
It made you're thinking, well, now there really is something. You gotta get it in gear and start moving. And then when I got the call, which we'll get into that, whatever, and they said, oh, it's at the Olympic. So think about it. When I was going there when I was a kid, when my dad was taking me to see Roddy Piper, Black Gordon, now you're gonna go there and work a show. So it just came full circle. And then they're like, okay, now we know what this is huge.
Dude, I remember again, see, I knew the Olympic, but I grew up in the 80s, so I went to the sports arena for wrestling.
Yeah.
And I knew the Olympic and I knew the history because I remember my grandfather would tell, oh yeah, 1932 Olympics and all that. But I remember Rivera, dude. And I didn't even talk about this when I interviewed him, but I remember we were just walking, got there early, and we were kind of talking about what we are going to do later, blah, blah, blah. And he was just like, I'm like, all right, Larry, let's go up here. This is where the table, our broadcast is going to be. And he was just standing there like, yo, Rivera, come on. And literally, I didn't see a tear, but it was one of those moments.
Yeah.
Like, shit, dude.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, I'm good. But that we didn't talk. That was it. That's all we talked. But I remember, and then I would hear him talk how special it was. But I still remember that moment where I looked at him like, wow, this is hitting him hard, dude. It's awesome.
Yeah. Just to know what went on there and the history and all that, and then to actually be there, it was huge. I'll be honest, I was scared to death when I got there because I didn't even really know what we were doing. You know what I mean? So I didn't even get a chance to look around and soak it all in because it was so different of what we were going to do that night.
Right. Well, okay. So let's get into that. We're talking now that you mentioned that. So New Year's Revolution, it was January 11th, 2002, Grand Olympic. Okay, so Pogo the Clown. in a no contest. Now it was the okay. So this is the angle that was called the SoCal Jobbers Union.
Exactly.
What happened was Rob Black, CEO XPW, he was the heel, and he always threatened to fire guys, and they were going to go back to working the Boys and Girls Club. They're not going to be in the sports arena of the Olympic anymore, right? In the high school. So he kind of got a lot of heat, and I think he did this because, SoCal Uncensored, for example, always buried us, right?
Right.
And so he purposely, like, you know what? Screw them, screw everybody else, and he worked that into his character. So as that was happening, you had guys in XPW that maybe didn't agree with that. Guys like Dynamite D, right? And okay, he doesn't really agree with that. The fans kind of know he's a purist, an old school guy. Let's work that in. He's the face representing all the young guys coming up. So in comes you guys, the SoCal Jobbers Union. And it was like the rest of the indie scene versus XPW. And the fans were like kind of like NWO, WCW a little bit,
Right.
And you had Big Schwag was your mouthpiece. You had Mike Tricks, Cyberspace, Street Styles, Buddy George, AWC, and it was all you guys in a handicap match against Pogo. Can you talk a little bit about that night? If please tell me.
Well, this is what happened. Ron called me 8:00, maybe 8:30 the night before, and said, "Hey, look, this is what's going on. We're gonna do the SoCal Jobbers Union stuff. Be at the Olympic at this time. I'll meet you at the door. Blah blah blah, whatever." I had no idea what was going on or anything like that. And when I saw Schwag, I knew it was going to be something different because I used to do a show with him, Samoa Joe, Cena, Looney Lane, and all that. So luckily it was somebody that I knew. So then they sit us around and said, "Look, this is what we're doing. We're gonna put you in the crowd, and Pogo's gonna come out, cut a promo, and we're gonna jump him." And I go, "Okay, yeah, cool." I see Pogo the Clown. It's this dude's 6'5", 6'6", 400 and something pounds, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, what are we doing?" From there. So I was a little bit nervous, but let me just can I just tell a quick story before we get into that? Because like I said, I was scared to death when I got there. So once I got there, you were mentioning all those names, but there was one kid that used to work for UPW, Cowboy, had a cowboy gimmick with the hat, in shape. I mean, this guy was just ripped to shreds. Right. I can't remember his name. Do you know it?
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know the name.
So we're standing there. Ron goes, "All right, look, guys, stay right here. I'm gonna make sure we know what we're doing. I'll come back." So, okay, cool. So as this kid, he doesn't have his shirt on. I don't know why, but he's just ripped to shreds. So here comes New Jack, and he's looking at him, and he's looking at him up and down. And I'm thinking, man, I hope this guy knows who New Jack is or whatever. So he says, "Hey, man, what's up?" He says, "What's going on?" He said, "You wrestling tonight?" He says, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, where's your gear?" He goes, "It's in the car." He goes, "Well, why don't you go get it? You and I are going to go wrestle a little bit before the show starts." And I'm looking, and he goes, "Well, I don't have no credentials." And he goes, "Well, take mine." So he gives him his credentials, goes, "Go get your stuff. I'll meet you in the ring." And I went, so I went up to him. I said, "Hey, man, I don't know what's going on, but New Jack really doesn't wrestle. I mean, he just, pretty much beats people up or whatever." So, "Well, what do you think? Should I get my gear?" I said, "If it was me, I wouldn't do it, but go ahead." So finally he comes back and he goes, "I ain't doing it, man." He goes, "I go away." He goes, "This guy can't I could see stuff bulging out of his pocket and all that. And I said, "It's a smart move not to do it." But the way New Jack looked at this kid, I'm like, man, he just looked at him like, "Who do you think you are?" or whatever. So that even triggered a little bit more of, man, this is, I knew who New Jack was, but to see him in person and see him kind of, come up to somebody like that, it was a whole different ball game. But anyways, that's how it started. That's how my first interaction.
That's easy, man. I never knew that.
So anyways, you remember what went on or whatever. So I mean, do we pull the curtain back that much and tell when we talk to Pogo, or you know what I mean? Because he says, "Okay, look, this is what we're doing, blah blah blah. Favi, you come up, I'm gonna give you a clothesline, you powder." I'm like, "All right, cool." So they put us out, in the crowd, and we're sitting up there. I think we were sitting like second row. We weren't like actually in the first. So when it's time to go, bam, we jump over the rail, we come in. I remember the cowboy went before me, and it looked like he took his head off, and the people were going nuts. And I thought, man, this guy, can work or whatever. So I come in, I took the clothesline. I'm coming off. I'm like this, waiting for the clothesline, and that's all I remember. I woke up and I was looking at the lights,
Wow.
and all that could go through my head was like, we didn't do the spot, or whatever. I had no idea what was going on. So I turned, and Ron is at the outside of the ring, and he looks at me and he goes, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I go, "What happened? We didn't do the spot." He goes, "Roll out, roll out." He goes, "He knocked you smooth out." I said, okay. I said, I never felt the thing, but I had a buzzing in my ear, like a really bad buzzing. And my only thought was I had $14 in my waist pack, and I had given it to the guys at the table. So I was like, I gotta get my waist pack. So I turned around, and they had some gimmicked glass things by the ramp, and
Yes,
he stepped right through the glass
I remember that. Yeah.
and busted. And I was like, what's going on, man? So anyways, I get to the back, and the Ron says, "You got to go see the medics." And I'm like, I feel okay. So they go see the medics, and the medics come and they go, "Dude, that was awesome." But I go, he knocked me out. I never knew what happened. So he says, "Man, there's so much blood in your ear." He goes, "I can't even see." He goes, "You got to go straight to the ER."
Wow.
I said, "Man, wait." I said, I'm in LA. I don't know anybody here. I live in Long Beach, and I had been working at Long Beach Memorial for a couple of years. And I said, "Can I just go back towards people I know?" They said, No, you got to go. So as soon as they walked off, I took off. So I got in the car. You remember where the Olympic is by the 10 freeway? And
Right.
somehow I ended up by Dodger Stadium. I have
Okay.
no idea how I got there. So I went. There was 2 traumas. I couldn't get in. So I asked the lady, I said, "Can I go home and get cleaned up? I'll come back about 4 o'clock." And when she said, "Yeah, that's the best. That's the best thing." So I couldn't park my car because I couldn't turn my head to parallel park. So my neighbor parked the car for me. So I'm walking up the steps because I live upstairs, and I'm limping. And I thought, did he hit my leg? He hit me so hard that he knocked my left shoe off. I only had one Nike on.
Oh,
So it's still at the Olympics somewhere. So, anyways, then that I got cleaned up, and I went, and they had to patch my ear and stuff like that. But that was my first experience with XPW, because I mean, honestly, I never felt a thing. But that's all what happened. But I got hit so hard that my left shoe came off, because I mean, dude, you know how Pogo is. You see
yeah.
how big that dude is. If
Oh, yeah.
he, with all his weight and everything, it just it just was I don't want to say the worst experience I ever had, because I really wasn't in pain just from what happened, but it was just that was my first experience. So
Yeah.
real quick, this is why I appreciated XPW, which is a thing that I don't think people understand. I think they just think it was just this crazy, fed that just did this wild stuff. But Kevin called me the next day, not Ron, Kevin, and he said, "Hey, look, man, I saw what happened. I know you're going to be down for a little while or whatever." He goes, "But I'm telling you, you come back, I'll make sure I give you a good match or
Oh,
whatever." And he was a man of his word, and he actually did. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great, man. And what a what an
Well, real quick, I got to tell you this, because when Joey Chaos, when he was coming up in the business, him and Lester, I had worked a few shows with Lester doing some lucha stuff.
yeah.
So we had worked quite a bit before, because like I said, that's all that was going around back then. And Joey was a little like skinny kid with curly hair and all this. So when that's one thing that I took away from that, when we were sitting in that crowd, and it was him against Juventud and Nosawa, or Psicosis and Nosawa, in
Right.
a 3-way. Man, this dude comes out, he's buffed out, he's got a tan, he's got blonde hair, he's got this belt. I mean, I was like, wow,
Yeah.
what happened? So when I saw him probably a couple of weeks down the line, I told him, and he said, "Oh, that's all Ryan. Ryan Katz told me, look, man, this is what you got to do." And I mean, I was amazed, honestly. I mean, it was like he looked, Rock Superstar was perfect for him, because that's what he looked like.
Yeah, for those of us that remember him from back in the UIWA days and before,
Yeah.
and that was quite the transformation. Probably the most impressive one in the company. Him and Luke Hawx. Luke Hawx laid it down the road, but yeah, you're right. In the tenure of XPW, because if you watch even during like 1999, Reseda Country Club days, Kid Chaos.
Yeah,
it's a totally different person. You're right, Fav. You're right.
yeah, yeah, and it just was a show. I mean, he came out and really looked a lot different. So I honestly think Kevin and Ryan don't get as much what's what I'm looking for, props as they should, because both well, go ahead, because when they did actually give me my second match against R-Truth, there was a couple of more things behind that. So go ahead.
All right, well, let's get to that then. Liberty or Death, June 29th, 2002. Pretty close to home for you where you grew up. This is at the Pico Rivera Sports Arena, no relation to Larry Rivera.
Yeah.
And, K. Malik Shabazz, of course, as well, Ron Killings. And his partner, Salih Jihad, defeated yourself and Buddy George. Of course, that's the Tex-Mex Express. And
yes.
Dude, the Mex, the Hillbilly, the Tex. And it was a cool little thing you guys had. Your feud with Styles, the Eminem, like that was funny stuff. I thought,
Yeah,
but,
it was good.
But yeah, please talk about that, because that was in June 2002. Your first one was January of 2002. The first one was at the Grand Olympic. This again, Pico Rivera, and working with Ron Killings. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, honestly, in this business, guys that are, and to me, I think maybe, you kind of have to be a little cutthroat in this business, but there's very few guys that are man of their word. And that was Kevin, because I didn't expect a call. I thought, that's it, dude. I got hurt. But he called me and he said, hey, look, man, I got a good match for you. I'm going to put you and Buddy against he said Ron Killings and the guy's name. And I'm like, all right, cool. I thought, all right. So we went down there, and what happened was, this is just when cell phones came out, and I was impressed because I saw R-Truth with the cell phone. So I'm walking, and he's on the cell phone, and he goes, yeah, he's telling his wife or whoever, we're just going to lay these dudes out real quick and I'll be out of here. I'll be home in like 10 minutes or something. And I'm looking, I said, what? And so I went to Kevin. I said, hey, man, are we getting squashed? I said, because he just talked to his wife and said, he'd be home in 10 minutes. He says, hold on. So he pulled us all together, and he told, this is, R-Truth. What would you say? He's in WWE. So he was really on a roll back then when XPW had him. And he said, look, this is Faviano. I promised him a good match. That's why I put him with you, because I know that you can give him a good match or whatever. And he was like, oh, yeah, no problem. So he sat there, say, hey, man, let's do this, man. And we'll make you look, this way, just for lack of a better term, not put you over, but make you look good, shine you up. So, okay, cool. So the only thing was, though, they had all those exploding like bags or whatever that were around the ring, and they kept telling us, do not step on those bags because they're going to blow up or whatever. So anyways, here comes Ryan Katz, and he's looking at us, and he's looking at all four of us. Did we do something? He goes, you know what? Gives Kevin some money and says, go to the store and buy some Black Dickie shirts and some Black Dickies for these guys. He tells them, give them your size. Kevin's going to go get them. I'm going to make you guys the new Black Panthers. I think that worked. And I thought, this guy's a genius, man. So they came out as the Black Panthers, and they got so much heat, from the people. And so when we were babies and we're, getting over it, and then they come back and kill us, the crowd went nuts. And I thought, man, this guy really knows what he's talking about. So another, example of people who know what they're talking about. And R-Truth was probably one of the most professional people that I've ever worked with. The only thing was, he kept grabbing me, going, watch out, you're going to step on the bag. You're going to step on the bag. And we didn't want to blow up. Other than that, it was a perfect match.
Yeah, he was watching out for himself, telling you not to step on the bag.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to, it's funny too. It's funny too, because when we were leaving, believe me, I left that place much happier than the Olympic. It was like a great match, and I was really grateful. So Shane Douglas had just taken over the book, So I see Damien, Halloween, and all them. So I'm telling him, hey man, what's up, whatever talking. So Shane Douglas starts walking by, and I say, hey man, I can go with the lucha guys. I work lucha for a minute. And he looks at me, and goes, I'm gonna look at you, Favi. I'm gonna look at you, Favi. Just kept walking. Never heard from him again.
Wow. Well, yeah, that was also the transition time when we were heading back east and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But those, I can honestly say that those, two experiences were good for me. I mean, because I found out, hey man, it's not all fun and games. When you're working with big dudes, you gotta, expect certain things. And then for somebody to keep their word and say, hey man, we're gonna get you a good match and actually do it, that so I can, a lot of people, give XPW such a hard time and a bad rap. But my experiences weren't that bad, although they were through Ron. But with people like Kevin and Ryan, it made my experiences, I have I don't have anything bad to say. I mean, I just don't.
Yeah, Rob Black and Kevin, and they were very different, but they also were able to. Rob had his own vision, Kevin had his own vision, but when they got together and they would click, that's where the magic happened. Like
Yeah.
when they were able to kind of like Rob had these outlandish, but and then Kevin would take those ideas and kind of take the steering wheel with them and drive them where they need
Exactly.
to go. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a good example. When I saw Damien Halloween, when they went out to Philly, and I saw Damien and Halloween work against Smokey Carmichael and somebody else, I thought that match was great. I thought it was one of the better tag matches, and I thought, well, who's ever's putting this together knows, how to put it together.
Those
So,
were
and
good
then that was it. Yeah, that was the last I saw of it.
Smokey Carmichael and Malcolm XL.
Yes.
Yeah, and then those matches against Damien Halloween, fantastic.
Right. I agree.
Right, they gelled.
Yeah.
All right, man. So you shared a lot about the Grand Olympic, Pogo, Ron Killings. But yeah, and then of course, did you do, aside from those two matches and the promos, did you do anything else aside that, and as far as like inner workings with XPW? Or
No, that after the Pico Rivera Sports Arena, I know they called me for something else, and I couldn't make it because I can't remember what it was. It might have been like my regular shoot job or whatever.
yeah,
But then right after that, the unholy, who was my partner for years, said, "Hey, look, man, we're getting a little bit older. I'm going to broadcasting school. Let's do a radio show." So I went that way and never went back. Yeah.
okay, cool. Yeah, I remember that. We talked a few years ago now, but I remember that now that you mentioned it, telling me that
Yeah.
you're into broadcasting. So talk a little bit about your thoughts. I mean, you shared everything about most. You tell what you think of Kevin Kleinrock. On a whole, your thoughts of Rob Black.
I only met Rob Black 2 times.
Okay.
One when we were shooting for the promo for the TV show, which I didn't really know about, and he was more than cordial with me. I mean, granted, I was but he's like, "Hey, Favi, what's up?" Whatever. Ron tells me a lot about you and stuff like that. I think we got something here or whatever. I'm like, "Yeah, man, cool," and that was pretty much it. And then I saw him at the Olympic or whatever, and he said the same thing. He said, "Man, that was great, dude," or whatever. It was great because it was real. You know what I mean? He's like, "Dude, that was great bump. I loved it. Everything was great, man. I appreciate you." And I'm like, "Okay." And I could barely hear. I couldn't hear out of this ear, so I could hear out of that ear and whatever. So those are my 2 interactions with Rob, and that's why it's you can't talk about somebody if you don't know. All my whatever you do in your own time is your business. But my interactions with you he was cool, with me, although I wasn't, a big name or whatever. I mean, and he didn't have to, but he was like, "Hey, that looked good. I appreciate it." And at least he let me know,
Wow.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit too now, of course, like we said in the beginning of this, as before we wrap up here, talk a little bit how you started your own promotion.
Well, I as I'm getting a little bit older, I retired. But
Yeah.
this is, and we talk about this a lot, how things happen. A certain promoter told me one time, why don't you have your daughter carry the flag, the Mexican flag for you? And I said, okay. I said, you want to catch? She said, yeah. And it just took off, and especially now the women are so in demand, she started getting calls from everywhere. So I had to teach her how to take a bump. And, I said, hey, well, if you're going to be a manager of valet, you got to know how to take a bump and all that. So I got back into the business, just because, for lack of a better term, just to show her the ropes, or whatever. And it snowballed back into, well, can you come out here? Well, how about, can you come out here? And then 3 different companies I work for now. When we're talking about earlier, UWC, I've been booking for them, which is a nightmare. I don't know why anybody would take that job, because it's so hard, because to put the matches together, but you don't want to hurt this guy's feeling if you can't put him on the show. And I go back and forth, and it's just constant, So honestly, this is definitely my last year of wrestling. Luckily I have the comfort or whatever to only choose shows that I want to work or whatever. But honestly, since I've been slowed down a lot, it's nice to go to a show and just watch it, and you see the talent. And then that's where I saw you at the Inoki Dojo show.
Yeah.
It's nice to sit down and see people that you haven't seen for a while.
That's when I walked by, I'm like, I haven't seen you for a while, dude.
Yeah.
It's Favi. And
Yeah.
then Puto Rasu, but that was the first time I'd ever seen you at a show where you weren't working somehow in the back.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
luckily I have a 10-year-old nephew, and so I take him, and then I can mark out and just say it's because of him. You know what I'm saying? So that's how that worked out. But he's like me, because he's been, he's always in my house, and all he talks about is wrestling. So I take him to all the shows. So he wanted to see Alberto Del Rio and Carlitos and them, but he hears me talk too much. So Carlitos was charging $10 for a picture. I said, all right, cool. Gave him $10 to take a picture. So my nephew's in front of me and waiting for Alberto Del Rio. And I told the guy who was right there, I said, hey, how much is it for a picture? And he goes, oh, it's 20. And my nephew goes, $20? And he turned around and walked away. So I'm face to face with Del Rio. Hey, I'm sorry. I turned around and walked away.
Hey, man, it was honesty.
Yeah, but honestly, it is nice to go and sit and watch and check out the new talent. And and I have a lot of people that I talk to. Hey, well, we're thinking of bringing this guy. What are you thinking of? Yeah, I saw him at the Pururesu show. I'm gonna say probably 3 or 4 promoters called me and asked me about that Santana Jackson, and I'm like, yeah, that guy put on a show. So you never know, what show you're working. People are watching you, and that's how you progress. So
and you actually came in on the we were streaming live on Danny Ramirez's GXW TV. A little plug for him on Facebook, and we were streaming live. So you joined me on there. That was fun, man.
It was cool. Yeah, like I said, had a great time.
And
and to this day, speaking of Kevin, because I worked for a few different podcast companies. I worked for Tap Out for 7 years, and then I went to Sinister, and then I went to On the Mat. And when the COVID hit, On the Mat had to pull the plug because weren't making any money or whatever. 2 days after that, I get a call from Kevin, and he says, "Hey man, what happened with On the Mat?" So they had to pull the plug. Well, why don't you come over here? Come over here, and we'll take care of you. And so now I work for him, Lucha Central, on Tuesdays. So it never stops. You make friends, and you never know. So still to this day, through XPW, I'm working for Kevin, Lucha Central.
Man, it's a small world, really is. And wow, it's all full circle, man. That's what I can't think of a better way to wrap up this episode. But before we do, the last question I want to ask you, Favi, and I ask this to everybody on Xtreme Memories at the end, and I love to get your what comes out of the mind of King Faviano, because like I said, you've been there, you've done that pre, post XPW. In your mind, in the world of pro wrestling, what will be the legacy of XPW?
For me personally, I have never seen anything in my when we worked that show at Pico Rivera Sports Arena, and Angel and Lester came off that it was like a balcony
Yeah.
into a pool, and when they were getting it ready and they were putting all, I said, "What is going on here?" And when I saw that, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life.
That
But
was GQ Money and Angel coming
yeah,
into the.
GQ Money and Angel. You're right. You're right. And when they came flying off that thing, I had never seen anything like that before. But to me, the legacy that XPW will always leave is that they took a chance, through Ron and said, "Hey, man, let's step it up. Let's bring these guys. Let's bring the guys from Rev Pro, and we'll bring them." So they, in other words, they weren't scared to take a chance.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Oh, yeah.
regardless of what people say or whatever, I there's nothing I can say that was other than me getting hurt, which happens in the business. There's nothing I could look at. I met Kevin. I met Ryan. Back with Joey Chaos, and it was a great place to get to the top. You know what I mean? Because it's like, man, now we're here. This is a huge company. Got to step it up. So it propelled you onto bigger and better things. If you didn't get, stay there and work yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a crazy different time in the world, and it definitely has that. That was a perfect way to put it. It was like you were right. If one thing you can say you can't take away from it, it was never afraid to take any chances.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Well, King Fav, thank you, brother, for being a part of this, and it's good seeing you again. And hopefully, I'll see you down the road. And any shout outs to anybody or any plugs or?
Of course, big shout out to Kevin Kleinrock for still taking care of me to this day. Ryan Katz, I talked to him, a message back and forth with him because I think that's a great mind for wrestling. So hopefully he's gonna, got some stuff going on. And of course, Joey from Santino Brothers. It's funny because I went to go over there to see some people train and just to sit and talk about those days of XPW. It's nice to sit down and talk with them like that. So big ups to them, and to you. It was nice to see you at that show, man. Hopefully I'll see you at the next one for sure.
Yeah, you too, man. Well, hey, thank you, fans, for joining. And on behalf of all the fans, King Faviano, I want to say thank you, brother, for doing what you're doing and for joining us right here on Xtreme Memories. For my guest, King Faviano, my name is Kris Kloss. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching Xtreme Memories, hosted by Kris Kloss. He's dropping new episodes every month on the 15th and 30th. You can be the first to tune in by subscribing to the Wrestling Chatter channel right here on YouTube. See you next time.